Good evening, everyone. I declare the agenda briefing forum of the 17th of June 2025 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, Subiaco, open at 5:30 p.m. Welcome to you all. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of this land, and I recognise their ongoing connection to our land and waterways in Subiaco. I'll take attendances now, and I'm aware that Councillor Powell has sent an apology for this evening, so we won't be joined by Councillor White. Councillor White, I know who you both are. And I think we are expecting Councillor O'Connor. No, we're not. Okay. Councillor O'Connor's on leave. Very good. Everyone else is present and accounted for. We've got our entire executive leadership team back, so if you've been on paternity leave, welcome back to you, Mr. Hambley. And welcome to the other staff who are present and on call as needed as well. Okay. Alex Petrovsky is sick. Okay. All right, we'll make do with manager planning services then. Okay, are there any disclosures of interest this evening? Okay, thank you. There are no approved deputations. Any announcements by the presiding member can wait until next week. Let's get straight into the officer reports, beginning with C1, the scheme amendment to local planning scheme number 5 for short-term rental accommodation. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I have a few questions relating to this item. It talks about the management plan. How will we be able to modify to include all complaints? How could we modify the management plan, that is, to be able to let neighbours know that any complaints they have should also be copied and forwarded to City of Subiaco so that we're aware of any complaints and concerns?
Manager Planning Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMahon. So this item is obviously relating to scheme amendment number 4, considering the STRA matters. So we have referenced, I guess, the management plan in the report and also in the response to submissions. So what the city's approach is currently is to require a management plan be submitted as part of a development application, as we have done with a couple of other previous ones to date. So on receipt of a management plan as part of a DA, we would advertise that to adjoining property owners to review, and they can consider the impact, potential impact of that, and that'll be consideration as part of any development application. So the city is obliged through the DA process, not necessarily through the scheme amendment process, to consider, I guess, those amenity impacts. As we've done for previous STRA applications, in our recommendation, we would also seek to send a copy of the management plan to those that have made a submission.
I guess I'm really asking how. I know at the moment, when we discussed this last month, that the management plan wasn't including for neighbours to include City of Subiaco in any of their complaints. So if we're unaware of complaints, if they're directing if the management plan just says send it to the police, if it's this, send it to the host, if it's this, unless all those complaints, unless we have a centralised complaints register here, and neighbours are instructed to also notify City of Subiaco and forward City of Subiaco on those complaints, we're ignorant of the complaints. And so when we talk about being able to address concerns, which is what's noted here about antisocial behaviour, that unless we know these concerns, we're not able to do very much because we're in the dark. So how can we actually modify those management plans to include a process, a complaints process that loops City of Subiaco in.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So that would be separate from this scheme amendment process. We can definitely look at what's involved in the management plan and what's included. So I think we've mentioned at a previous council meeting that if we do get complaints, obviously we investigate those complaints on their merit. So it's not like we just get the complaint and don't take any action. We consider it in the context of whether there's been a potential breach of a planning approval or a condition.
Okay, thank you. One of the options, option 3, outlined in table 1, at the bottom, it talks about should council wish to place limits on the operation of unhosted STROs, to manage amenity impacts. It's recommended that a local planning policy is prepared through a separate process to guide decision making on unhosted STRAs. So how would we go about that? How long would that take? And can you outline what that process would look like? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And
Major Planning Services, if you could give us an overview, but just bearing in mind what we're actually being asked to approve this month, which I think is a scheme amendment which Council's previously endorsed and which has been out to advertising and which you're now recommending we approve as advertised. So let's get your advice in that kind of spirit.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So it is open to council to create a local planning policy that would be separate to this process. We'd probably do a workshop with elected members just to run through what issues they'd like to be captured as part of that. So that'd probably be done first, and then we'd follow the administrative process as set out in the regulations. So probably 2 to 3 months, kind of fastest turnaround time.
Great, thank you. When I'm looking at the attachments now for this item C1, and I just need to pull that up myself. Point 4, it talks about local planning context, and there's a sentence in there, and it refers to visitors and tourists. Now, are these terms that are used being used in the same way? They're used in the same 2-part sentence.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. I think it's just a generalised term, just describing tourists and visitors, not necessarily different people.
Councillor Johnston, some follow-ups?
Yeah, thank you. If I go down further, it talks about the model tourist and visitor accommodation land use, refers to a holistic review that will be conducted in 25-26 to ensure a proper and orderly approach to planning. I'm just wondering what the difference is between this supposedly new approach and what we're doing now. What's the holistic approach going to entail that we don't do currently?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So maybe just going back a step. So this scheme amendment is brought about in response to changes, I guess, imposed by the state government. So we're responding to those directly at this point in time. In the future, obviously, with more information, we'll be able to consider, I guess, tourism and those types of land uses, accommodation, etc., in a more holistic and considered manner in the context of the local planning strategy and the scheme. But this is responding to the state government actions.
Thank you. And it's S20, restricted uses. So it's mentioned, and it also applies with the submissions that were received with officer comments. So number 2 submission, there was an officer comment that local planning schemes cannot prohibit USTRAs, unhosted short-term residential accommodation, and that it refers to using the management plan, which, you know, really doesn't seem to be particularly effective. So, and previously it's referring to local planning policy to restrict, to prohibit USTRAs. So could that comment talk about local planning policy as a way to prohibit USTRAs?
Major Planning Services, are you clear on what the question is?
Yes, I think I am, Mayor McMahon. So as outlined in the officer's report, metropolitan local governments cannot make unhosted STRA an X use. They can't prohibit the use. So the options are you make it a D use, a discretionary land use, which means it's a use that's not permitted unless council has exercised discretion, or you elevate that to make it an A use, which is basically a D use that requires public advertising. So that is basically consistent with what's in the deemed provisions. The deemed provisions has more power than a local planning policy. It sits above that. So you could not have a local planning policy that undermines or undercuts what's in the deemed provisions, such as making an unhosted STRA a prohibited use. That would be ineffectual.
So some of the others, like City of Busselton, is going through the process of making that an X prohibited use. How is it that they are able to do that, and it sounds like we're not able to do that?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMahon. It's a very good question. So the rules for metropolitan local governments are different to those that are in the region. So I did notice that the City of Busselton did do that. I think it was last week or the week before. But that is written in the regulations. So the rules are different for regional Western Australia as opposed to metropolitan local governments.
Just following on from that, I thought City of Cottesloe had that in place as well.
I'm not familiar with the town of Cottesloe's response, but you can't override the regs.
Thank you. And look, I'll leave it for there. I'm sure other people will raise some other queries.
Thank you. Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, mine's just a query and clarification around the bed and breakfast. What are the implications of removing bed and breakfast and short stay dwelling as defined land uses? So it's just that removing the bed and breakfast side. So will this restrict or eliminate the option for hosted short stay SDRAs to have bed and breakfast? I was just a bit confused by that, to be honest.
Mr Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMahon. No, it won't. So currently under the local planning scheme, you can have a short stay dwelling, which can be hosted or unhosted. It's been like that since the scheme was gazetted in 2020. So any property that's registered through the Demers website as a short stay before the scheme amendment comes into effect will continue to enjoy that benefit and that right.
Through you, Mayor, just to follow up the bed and breakfast aspect, that's kind of where I was querying.
Yeah, so that would equally extend to bed and breakfast, so that would be considered hosted. So if they are currently operating as that, they would continue to do that, provided they are less than 6 unrelated people.
Very quick one. When we do the review, and should that, obviously have had an impact on long-term rentals in Subiaco, will that be able to be a criteria in which we assess the ongoing, approval of certain areas having SDRAs, or has it got absolutely no impact whatsoever? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMahon. As I mentioned before, as part of the review, it will be holistic, but there's certain levers we can pull. So we can't make a planning framework that's inconsistent with the deemed provisions.
I'll just take the opportunity. I've seen your hand up, Councillor Jones, but I just want to take a high-level sanity check, I suppose, Mr Denham, just to remind myself what we're doing here. We've considered this amendment previously at a council meeting earlier in 2025. Officers made a recommendation to amend our local planning scheme, essentially in accordance with the deemed provisions to align with a state government mandate to, I suppose, bring planning schemes up to date and to reflect the relatively new phenomenon of short-term rental accommodation. At the time, a councillor put up an amendment which was duly supported by pretty much everyone in council, which would have required advertising of unhosted short-term rental accommodations. The scheme has gone out for advertising with that modification included. We've got the results from the advertising back. Is there anything in the advertising which would now justify us taking any of the alternative options mentioned at the end of this report The officer recommendation, of course, is to adopt the scheme amendment as advertised without modification. How would we even go back to, I suppose, the WAPC and ultimately the minister and advocate for something different in the context of the advertising process, which, as far as I can tell, has not come back in support of short-term rental accommodations?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMahon. So, yeah, you're right. Council's basically got three options. Next week, you can support the proposed amendment without modification from what went up in February. You can support the proposed amendment with modifications to address issues raised in the submission. So, we've obviously provided officer comment responding to each of the submissions. We don't consider that any further changes are required or necessitated. That is because what the amendment proposes is basically the highest level of protection that can be afforded to, so it's not inconsistent with the deemed provisions. If there was more things that we could do, we certainly would have looked at it. For instance, if we could make it an X use, that might have been responsive to the submissions, but we can't make it an X use because that would be inconsistent with the deemed provisions. So we have, I guess, flagged or foreshadowed the possibility of creating a local planning policy. That would be a separate process, which might add a bit more rigour and strength to considering unhosted STRA in particular. But I guess the options are fairly limited, and there's different risks associated with each option.
So, as I understand your advice, the scheme amendment process we're currently talking about is related to but separate to the policy making process which might follow.
That's correct.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure I was correctly understanding the situation. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to ask about the notification. The recent STRA applications we had, there was some concern that affected neighbours weren't being notified. So I'd like to know the details of how the city determines which neighbours to notify, and also what form does the public advertising take?
Mr. Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. I think I did touch on this at the OCM in last month, but we use Council's local planning policy for public consultation as a guide to basically undertake public advertising. So it's basically any property that it abuts or adjoins within certain dimensions, etc. So we'd send direct letters to owners and occupiers as a baseline to them to notify. As I flagged last month, it's certainly open to council to amend that policy to look to increase that should they wish, and that we can definitely consider that and work with council on that.
But that would be a separate policy issue. Yeah, it's not what we're debating this week. Yeah.
Any questions to my right? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mayor. Look, there was concern at last month's council meeting about the enforceability of the management plans. In fact, I think that played quite a part in the final council decision. So we're really being faced with something that is quite similar. So how do we get confidence that these management plans can actually can ensure compliance with what they're saying that they will do? Yes, that will be the start.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So council is not being asked to consider the imposition of management plans strictly, so we have referenced it in the report as something that could be done, and also through a local planning policy. That's certainly something that could be looked at as well. In relation to enforcement, we have got a compliance team, and if we do receive a complaint, we will actively investigate that complaint and take appropriate action in accordance with council's planning compliance policy.
One of the objectives to the officer recommendation, one of the community objections, was that there didn't seem to be any formal complaints service through the city, and especially the city's website. Now, that follows on almost, I think, with what Councillor Johnson was saying. Is there a formal complaints process that people can follow? And can it be outlined on our website? And, can our website be made essentially a register for them?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMillan, I could probably answer the question in part. So I think from the previous applications that were considered last month, which is not a consideration as part of, I guess, this item, if there were complaints that were made in relation to, say, parking or noise, in relation to existing short stay applications that were exempt from requiring approval, then the planning team wouldn't necessarily have seen them, but they would have been investigated and actioned independently by the relevant departments. I'd probably have to maybe defer to a director on whether the website could be updated with certain things, but.
All right, our chief webmaster, Mr. Cameron.
Thank you. Yes, one of the many tasks. Very soon, request management will be launched, which is going to form part of our integrated ERP or software as a service to bring all those different types of ways in which people complain into one area. So when that's launched, we could particularly put something in place whereby it made it a little bit easier. So there's a little bit of work to be done in terms of the workflow, but absolutely we'll be asking that all people that have any type of request, be it pothole or be it this type of issue, be it complaint or wanting to say we're doing a great job, they could put that through the request system. So, and it will find its rightful place for those that can take action to investigate, and then the person will get the response back to them in the manner in which they seek, whether by email or letter or phone call.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, excuse me, one final one really. In the attachments, it says under point 36, special control areas, that there are no special control areas that apply to this scheme. Now, if we were looking at some way of limiting where short-term stays are going to be, would that be part of what you'd be looking at in a local planning scheme, you know, to have special control areas?
By scheme, you mean policy?
Town planning, LPS 5, I think.
We're talking about an amendment to LPS 5.
Yeah, yeah.
We've foreshadowed the possibility of subsequent local planning policies. I just want to understand the question. Are you asking about whether the special control areas would be suitable subject matter for a policy or for, I suppose, the scheme?
I'm asking whether the special control areas would be appropriate for to address in a local planning policy, so that we could have some control over where the short terms are.
Okay, I think it's a policy question. Mr. Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMillan. So I think you can have special control areas which are, would require approval from the state, from what I understand. We don't have any in Subiaco. I think one example might be, say, Northbridge as a nighttime entertainment precinct. That's probably a special control area. There'd be other purposes that special control areas serve. That would be a separate process to this. So, yeah, something that would have to be considered separately, and the state government would probably need to approve that separately as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so special control areas are under are a state matter, not a local council matter. Is that correct?
Yep, that's my understanding. Yep.
Any final questions? Councillor Johnston.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if you got anyone over there had a question. Just a bit more touching on the complaints process and the officer's comments to the community consultation. So in the attachments, the comment number 9 talks about the complaints page on our website, and the officer comment says, please note that a complaint is distinct from a request for service. A request for service involves asking the City of Subiaco to take action on issues such as noise, parking, barking dogs, etc. Inquiries or complaints about STRA or any other planning matter should follow the standard request process. So I'm just So when someone's wanting to make a complaint about an STRA, are they having to do that through a request for service?
Through you, Mayor McMullen. So if, as I mentioned, so currently with short stay dwellings being exempt, it's quite difficult. It's impossible for planning to undertake planning compliance. But if we do receive a request or a complaint that may be relating to noise or car parking or waste, for instance, we will direct them to the relevant department to consider an action. So yeah, the website does provide options, but there's a differential between a formal complaint and the request for service, because I think there's two different options on the website, but we do action it appropriately when they do come in.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. No follow-ups. To my right, I think we're good. And to my left, I think we've had our questions also. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, Mr Denham. C2, the Community Safety Framework. Questions on C2. Councillor Kosovic.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. Please let me begin by observing that it's gratifying to see the implementation of a community safety framework finally coming before Council for deliberation. And at this time, I'd like to say a special thank you to the hard...
Councillor Kosovic, I know this is an area of interest and passion for you, but I'm getting a few looks around the table which I think are saying to me, make him ask a question.
Thank you. All right. Well,
invite him to ask a question. Let's put it that way.
I'm going...
We're looking forward to your debate next week, though.
Okay. My questions to the CEO are as follows. Does the decision to procure a mobile CCTV unit, as set out on page 10 of the officer recommendation, for covert use in illegal dumping hotspots, mean that areas such as parks, like the pocket park located between Bedford Avenue and Olive Street, once the illegal dumpers have been identified and prosecuted, mean we can expect to see rubbish bins being reinstated from where they were removed due to illegal dumping? And further, just this morning, my wife and I were stopped at the bus stop on Bagot Road near Axon Street by long-time resident Honey Donovan, who advised she'd been told that the rubbish bin adjacent to the bus stop had been removed due to illegal dumping. She was concerned, as we were, about the debris and rubbish strewn in and around the bus shelter. What is the city's policy with this? And again, I ask, when will these missing bins be returned, please?
Thanks for the questions. Look, I note we've got the Manager of Cultural Services here who effectively has ownership of the framework, and a staff member who's probably zoomed in for this report specifically. Ms Connolly, did you want to take the question, or did you want to ask a colleague or one of the directors to answer the question? Because it relates to waste, presumably. Okay, CEO, thank you.
In addition to websites, I do rubbish bins as well. So it's a good question. And there is obviously a e-bin across the road from it, as you well know. And we've been through the process of looking at the pocket park, and that will increase the SEPDEB principles in terms of people using that, and so hopefully reduce. We could deploy the CCTV if there was a particular issue. And in addition to that, I think the bus shelter's being replaced as well, that one there. So there's a range of things being done in that particular area, and we'll look at the placement of a bin and those sorts of things as well. But I suppose the point about this process is that we would have the tools to be able to deal with issues as they emerge, and there are different types of bins that are available. So it just depends on what's actually happening at that point in time, and what the best approach would be to reduce the illegal dumping, and CCTV is just one of those tools that we can put in place, as is other bins.
Thank you. I've got a couple of more questions. Thank you, Mayor. Is there enough scope within our new policy guidelines for the mobile CCTV unit to be deployed to help combat the growing incidence of vandalism or those who would smear our footpaths and or our public places with offensive words or signs, as has happened in the recent past, which you're aware of, Mr. Cameron. Thank you.
I might start and then hand over to Liz. But look, it will be available to try and attempt that. Noticing that some of the offensive material we've been trying to, we've been using some I suppose, covert CCTV to try and locate who is actually doing that at the moment, and we haven't been able to determine that. So it will certainly be available. Some of that stuff happens in different locations, which we're aware. And one of the other things around graffiti and those types of things, and bringing it all into one system, as I referred to earlier in terms of requests, is a lot of that is also spatially, so we can see where things are happening and try and monitor and hopefully predict where these types of things are occurring, given the number of issues that we'll be presenting. I'm not sure if there's anything else we probably could say.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McMullen. One of the foundations of the framework is that evidence-based decision making. So we won't be leaving our work here once the framework's done. We'll be monitoring customer complaints, customer requests, and all our usual data to identify if there are any issues, and we can certainly move and pivot our approach based on that data. We're actually working quite closely with our technical services colleagues in terms of the CCTV camera unit, so sharing information about specifications so that the unit can be used for multiple purposes, number plate recognition, all those things that come along with the unit, and we'll continue working with our technical services team on that, so there could be opportunity to use it for other purposes.
Thank you for that. Just one final question. Is there enough flexibility in our policy guidelines to allow the deployment of the mobile CCTV unit to assist in the deterrence of antisocial behaviour should it become an issue in the city's entertainment precincts and hotspots such as Market Square Park?
I might go first and then hand over. Yeah, look, certainly it can be deployed. Whether it is a deterrent or not is a different question, because if people are using an area for antisocial, generally it's a policing matter. So ordinarily what happens with CCTV is if there's arrest or something of that in relation to, and there is CCTV, then that assists the police in terms of the charges that they lay. I suppose the jury's out on whether it deters behaviour just because it's there. The best mechanisms that we've seemed to have, and we talk to police and Crime Stoppers, etc., about that, is generally having more people present in areas like, the Saturday night markets and those sorts of things. You bring people in, the less likelihood there is antisocial behaviour. But anything else, Liz, that you wanted to add potentially?
Before we hear from the manager, as I understood the question, it was not what are the pros and cons of CCTV, but could we, as a result of this decision, deploy CCTV to other purposes? In my hard copy printouts, I don't have a copy of the framework, but as I recall it, we're talking about CCTV primarily for the purposes of discouraging illegal dumping. So I think what Councillor Kosovich is asking is, as a result of this decision and this framework, might we be able to deploy CCTV for other purposes?
Yeah, and certainly we could, but I'll hand over to Liz.
Through you, Mayor McMullen. We certainly have the flexibility to, which is why we didn't want to prescribe quite detailed operational actions so that we could actually make decisions. What I would actually recommend is, as we trial the use of it through illegal dumping, we'll learn about the operational aspects of it, some of the governance aspects, which is really critical. A lot of my colleagues in other council areas who've given me some advice have recommended, if we determine that we'd like it as a long-term approach, that we should have a clear policy and some really good practices and processes around requests for information and those kinds of things. So I would recommend that there'd be a little bit more work to do so that we've got some good practice policy and governance processes around that.
Thanks for that answer. Councillor De Vries, is your hand up? Or
Yeah, sorry.
Councillor
I
De
was
Vries.
half reading and half thinking, thank you. Through you, Mayor. Maybe this is for Manager Connolly. Just a quick assessment. Just in your assessment, what way does the framework empower residents to play an active role in creating safer spaces rather than relying solely on passive surveillance systems, which is obviously quite embedded in the framework? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McMullen. One of the key focus areas, 7.4 education and training and 7.5 collaborations, that's where we can actually do more work with the community to build its capacity building. So you might recall when we talked about Crime Stoppers and those Eyes on the Street campaign, that's a part of community education and awareness, but we do need the community's assistance to utilise the appropriate channels, report information to right authorities, etc., etc. So that's the area of the framework where we'll be concentrating on developing actions, that community capacity building.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Just a follow-up question. That's really where I was going to go and focus a little bit more. One of the statistics in this report that really alarmed me was that given there's a 63% increase in family assault offences and I think it's the statistics are pretty alarming for increase in family-related threatening behaviour. So this is an area which we are concerned about because we do know that increase in violence is in the family home. And if we look at the statistics overall, it appears to be dropping. I note that there's going to be intervention programs, but I guess it's not primarily our role to do the training in the community, but is there any consideration going to be given to providing some sort of, training or community access or, just even once in a while having a hub where we might, be alerting the community that this is an area where we do have, violence does happen in the family home. That's more or less just a general question.
Through you, Mayor McMullen, and I've also got my community development coordinator online on the screen there. It's actually another key focus area in terms of education and training. Earlier this year, because we started seeing those statistics, and it's a statewide trend as well as local trends across WA and actually nationally, we started some coercive control workshops where we engaged an external facilitator to provide those. So again, it's that capability and capacity building, and we'll certainly keep continuing with those styles of workshops. As you mentioned, it's very difficult to know, where a local government's intervention can be, but that building community education and awareness is probably the best place that we're positioned. And we'll also work with Department of Communities and our state colleagues on what kind of related campaigns we can do together.
Given that illegal dumping is an area of it's an area of concern in Daglish, certainly there's Cunningham Terrace is a bit of a hot spot. It does seem that when it's reported, the illegal dumping is picked up quite quickly, which is a positive. Are we going to continue with a proactive policy of just getting rid of it when it happens? Because this seems to be an effective strategy which may not prevent it from happening, but certainly prevents it from being an eyesore. And could we do more to be a little bit quicker in getting that rubbish off the street? Thank you.
Conscious you may want to loop in technical services at some point, Ms Connolly. Did you want to do that straight away or say something as a precursor?
I would like to do that straight away, if that's okay
Mr.
with
Hamley.
you. Thank you.
It's more than okay.
Liz, you're most welcome to talk about bins as well, like Colin. But we have talked, like Liz has spoken about, we have spoken to colleagues about the effectiveness of CCTV to deter particularly known illegal dumping hotspots, which we have at least a half dozen that we're quite aware of in the city, and they do talk about how effective it is. What that might mean as far as the response to cleanups, as obviously it won't eliminate the problem, but I dare say it probably assist making the fewer collections that we do need to do a bit quicker as well. There's a less of a burden to be done because oftentimes that has to be staff diverted from other work to be done. So I dare say make it a quicker response time. And typically it's within a day or two as well. So it's not such a big issue.
Just while you've got the microphone, apologies if you haven't finished, Councillor De Vries. Okay, thank you. Who's monitoring the video feed? I take it that it will, in theory, reduce the incidences of illegal dumping, but who's actually watching the cameras? Manager.
Through you, Mayor McMullen, because I've been in the meetings with the waste colleagues, I can give you a little bit of insight into that. So the technology it's sort of cloud-based technology. It allows real-time viewing on apps, on your phone, on your screen. What we will need to work out with the waste officers is there's that proactive monitoring. So, for example, City of Perth have a camera control centre and have dedicated officers who are looking at live CCTV versus that, I suppose, using it to investigate issues. So we still need to work through that because there's obviously some resourcing issues and capacity constraints around that. So in the first instance, it might be more using it to respond to issues, investigate issues, help with prosecutions, and then we'll monitor it from there with James's team. James, is there anything else you'd like to add to that response?
Just so I'm clear, there's, in the first instance, not going to be a person sitting in front of a screen watching these cameras, but we're still going to be relying on reports being received, and the CCTV will serve as a tool to investigate those reports.
Correct, thank you.
Councillor De Vries.
So sorry if someone else wanted. I just wanted to jump in and ask a question I was going to ask around budget and whether this might necessitate an additional person being employed to work in this area. Is that something that's been considered, I think, through you to Manager Connolly, if that's okay?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McMullen. At the moment, because this is our first, I suppose, attempt at implementing CCTV, we're using this as a bit of a learning trial. So we're trying to understand capacity and resourcing as a part of that. So in the initial trial, we won't be increasing resources. We've got some funding to actually help purchase or lease equipment, but we will need to assess the resource impacts. So if we're finding that we're getting lots of reports, the footage is being quite useful, we think we might be needing it to expand our use of it, then we'll actually need to reassess that from a resourcing perspective.
Just if I can ask one question off the back of that, just coming back to the deterrent aspect, although we've heard that no one's sitting in front of a screen watching the cameras, we expect the placement of the cameras will serve a deterrent, presumably because everything that's captured on camera is being recorded. Is that correct? It's being recorded to the cloud and stored on an online server somewhere?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor McMullen. It's footage that's captured and we can go and access that footage for investigation and requests. And as more reports happen and we utilise that information and prosecutions occur, once that loop sort of closes around, that gives the community a little bit of feedback, if I dare say, and that helps actually them, from a behavioural change perspective, understand that it's a deterrent if they see that full circle of prosecution.
Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on the money being set aside, is there a definite budget? And surely we wouldn't be in a situation where if the police make a request and you were going to say we haven't got money allocated, or someone trained to do that? Is there someone going to be trained to be able to download? And can you just have a bit more detail on that, please?
CEO.
Also in conversations about budget as well as bins and other aspects, websites. Yeah, look, we've got budget allocated, but as Liz pointed out, you sort of do need to live and learn this experience as well. It's not like the City of Perth where they've got the control room fully funded. The lived experience at South Perth, which was sort of a similar approach, was about a third of an FTE in terms of getting the information for the police. Now that may well have just been because where they particularly did it was a hotspot. We've got to sort of understand that, but we've got capacity in the organisation to adjust should it be that sort of level, if that's what actually happens, and we can adjust resources through the budget. So if we need to, it's always budget review, etc. But we're confident at the moment we've got what we need, assuming Councillor adopt the budget next week. But should there be more resources needed than we anticipated, we can adjust that within the city budgets that we've got, so it's okay.
And just to clarify things, please, Mr. Cameron, what is the starting budget for this initiative, please?
Well, there's elements. I've got the finance manager that was looking right at me. There's elements in different areas. So obviously there's resourcing within Liz's area that's related to supporting a range of activities. There's contracts in place in relation to our seat, as we've described, the outreach processes. In terms of the budget, in Rob's area, he's the one that's going to manage this in terms of waste. They've got funding to secure in the first instance, we most likely secure like on contract, so we won't purchase it because we'll want to learn. So there's budget supporting that to actually lease the CCTV camera from an appropriate organisation. So there's various budgets in different areas. So I can't just give you an exact amount unless Liz wants to jump in on it. No. Okay. It's in a range of different places.
Yes, what I will through you, Mayor McMullen, is just to confirm in terms of resourcing, the resourcing for the waste, illegal dumping aspects will be under our waste and infrastructure team and my team for the community safety aspects. And we do have a separate budget allocation, which I've already forgotten. The manager of finance just literally told me it was about 170,000 allocated for the equipment part of the project.
Just one final question, if I may. Look, the City of Gosnells is the benchmark, at least by my reading, and they've been very successful and they've had a number of prosecutions. That is for detecting illegal dumping. Have we looked at them as the benchmark, and have we done anything in coordination with them to see what their learnings are from that experience?
Director of Technical Services.
Thank you. Like we mentioned, both Liz and Rob and their teams have actually spoken to a number of local governments. I believe Gosnells was spoken to, and we've spoken to at least 5 others who have CCTV, and quite honestly, a lot of them have the same feedback to us as far as the effectiveness and the deterrence aspect that we've already touched on tonight. So, yeah.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, this is a question, but I'm not quite too sure to whom it's addressed. And it does follow on with the CCTV, and it's about the priorities. You know, that if there's antisocial behaviour in Rockaby Road or vandalism of a shop or something, we don't, because we don't have the resources to tackle that, but we do have the resources, or we will provide the resources to tackle illegal dumping. So I'm just wondering whether there's a comment on the optics of, where we're actually putting our resources.
I mean, in any staff member's perception about optics is probably no valid than yours or mine, Councillor Powell. But perhaps just if you talk us through how we've got here, CEO, and I think part of your answer would involve the fact that the CCTV that we're talking about is subsidised by the state government, is it not? Because or the Waste Authority or someone is supportive of the program, which is why we're targeting waste specifically. I thought that's what we've discussed previously. Perhaps I'm misremembering.
I'll start and then somebody else will finish, I'm sure. So in terms of the approach of this framework is around, like I said, it's sort of bringing in all the SEPDED principles and the range of other elements. So you sort of got to have the tools in place. One of the things that is impacting us the most in terms of that's probably why we've recommended that in the first instance, let's use CCTV for illegal dumping, is because that's sort of an urgent need. In relation to antisocial behaviour, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that many people in Rockaby Road is going to reduce the amounts, and if there is antisocial behaviour, it may well be associated with people attending or frequenting it, which then becomes a private concern. But if it's antisocial behaviour in the public realm, generally it may turn into a policing matter, depending upon what that is, and we're certainly not responsible for that. So the CCTV can be used. We're supposed to be a little bit cautious in terms of the deployment of that, but doesn't necessarily mean we won't. but as has been the learned experience through liaising with lots of local governments in terms of privacy and a whole range of other elements, it's best to sort of tread cautiously, have all those sorts of things in place. So it's not about optics, it's about using the right tool for the right job. And what our lived experience is at the moment is that we've been able to deploy other methods to assist with also homelessness. I want to separate that from antisocial behaviour because they don't go hand in glove necessarily. So I think it's about having a framework, being able to treat people with respect and try and assist in certain areas. But if there is matters of policing, being able to liaise and work with the police in an appropriate way. CCTV can help in certain circumstances. Obviously, we are close to a train station or a couple of train stations, and that quite often is where some of the antisocial behaviour can occur. So we could deploy that. They have their own CCTV as well. So we need to complement the state systems that are in place as well as what is appropriate for Subiaco. So it's not that we won't, it's that predominantly in the first instance, while we're getting used to it, we think the most appropriate would be in terms of the illegal dumping. Unless there's anything else you want to add?
Pretty fulsome answer. Thanks, CEO. Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you for taking that question and for the answer. And in fact, you brought up the other question I was going to ask, which is about homelessness. And I mean, look, that is a problem that, involves many different organisations and a very difficult one to deal with. But what I'd like to address is some of the figures from graph 3, which show that, an increasing level of homelessness and increasing use of the walk-in centre. And I mean, some of the figures in that part of the report really do seem to be quite surprising, that there were 18 walk-ins in Q1, 23-24, and 114 in the same quarter in the following year. 36 interactions from Q1 to 299 the following year. I mean, I suppose what I'm asking is, does that mean that, sort of our present policies really aren't working, and how will this new policy help overcome what seems to be quite a growing problem?
I think it's appropriate to hear from the manager on that one, Ms. Connolly.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McMullen. One of the differences, I suppose, in the graphs is when we first opened the centre, the awareness of the centre isn't really there in the community, and it's taken a while to build those trusts and relationships and share that the centre's there. So that actually does lead to an increase in attendance. So the more people are aware that it's there, they utilise the service. So given the service is only about 24 months, 18, 24 months in terms of operating capacity, it's natural to see that increase as the awareness is raised. Certainly, our statistics are very similar this year to last year in terms of the homelessness reports that we receive. We have, as we've spoken about in workshops, some sort of peaks over summer and also the beginning of winter as people shift and are looking for safe and warm places. Being so close to the inner city, we do get some of that flow on as well that we notice, particularly at the beginning of winter. So our data, I suppose, we've only got a couple of years worth of data to examine, and that's why we're monitoring the aspects. But I think the primary reason for increase is awareness that the facility is there, so people are using the facility.
Thank you.
Look, I'll ask a question, CEO, and if you think the point hasn't been made when I get the answer to my question, then we'd be happy to hear from you. I heard the CEO say earlier that homelessness and antisocial behaviour are different issues and they don't go hand in glove. So I think we need to be careful in the questions we're asking. I suppose, are we expecting too much from the community safety strategy to see a drop in homelessness? Is that one of the outcomes we can expect to see from a community safety strategy? To my mind, people using the homelessness drop-in centre might be doing it tough, but I don't think we can conclude that that they're the same group who cause community safety issues, which I think is what this framework's directed at. Are we wanting to see results from this framework that that it's not intended to deliver?
Perhaps I'll start and then hand over just to pick up. We are part of a system, and there are certainly areas across the metropolitan area that are hit hard in a lot of those particular areas. Ours does tend to be a little bit seasonal, although it doesn't take much for something to occur even close to us that then has an impact on us as well. So the idea was trying to put this together to make sure we had a coordinated approach across the various business units within the city, so we could respond in a more timely fashion, particularly to concerns that people may have. And in this most recent season, I suppose most of the greater concerns seem to be with people that had just moved to Subiaco as well, hadn't sort of experienced sort of that cyclical nature that we traditionally find in Subi, but that doesn't mean that it's always going to be the same. And as I've said, there's quite often external factors that impact in relation to Subiaco where things may be more prevalent, both in terms of the issues that we're trying to address here. So at times our response might need to be significantly greater, and then at other times it'll be significantly less. So that's why this framework's been deployed, so that we can work really well collaboratively, understand the roles and responsibilities across the city, and if we need to ramp up effort in a particular area, we've got greater intelligence, both working with the police and working with all the partners that we've got in place at the moment. But Liz, I'm not sure if there's anything else.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McMullen. Very good question, because there is a relationship between people's perception and experience of safety and homelessness. So to answer your question around will the safety framework help us address homelessness, it's not going to be the ultimate solution. We do need to actually work with our state partners. And I will share, we're at the moment working with our inner city council colleagues on an Advance to Zero project. So we're scoping that out with the Alliance to End Homelessness. So we feel that some of those supplementary activities, working with inner city councils to work on strategies around housing first approach, local responses, sharing of information, because often people who are rough sleeping are crossing boundaries, so we can't work on this solution by ourselves. It's really critical we work with our inner city colleagues on that. We're also a part of an inner city homelessness working group as well. And we're even collaborating on things like trauma-informed response to homelessness and training for all staff frontline services. So there's a lot of additional actions that we're needing to do, working with the state as well as other service providers that will be in addition to the framework. Hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, some great answers, thank you. Councillors, I'm conscious it's approaching 6:30 and we're only just up to C2. Are we still going with questions on C2 or shall we move on to C3? Councillor Johnston.
Sorry, it's a quick one. It's just basically the data for the particularly the homelessness data. I take it that that's the number of reports each month from the community that's received. I presume that that's sort of how I'm reading it, and that there haven't been any reports since March of this year. Is that how I interpret that?
Major Cultural Services.
Thank you for the question, through Mayor McMullen. At the time that we put the document together, that's a snapshot of the data that was received at that point in time, so we can refresh that graph for final publication because we've got more of our data since producing the report. I can confirm even just of this past month for June, current state, we've had around 16 reports via our homelessness request.
Excellent. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to C3, the tender for the provision of cleaning services for Lords. Questions on C3? Okay, very good. Questions on C4, the tender for the supply and lease and finance of cardio equipment at Lords Recreation Centre. Any questions on C4? Okay, we'll move on. C5, proposed new road names for the Subi East redevelopment area at the former Princess Margaret site. Councillor Burns.
Cognizant of the time, I'll snap this. It's presently my intention to put forward an alternative to remove Kite Street and replace it with Daydor, not disparaging any of the other names that were offered within the report. But does anybody foreshadow something I need to know about from staff's position that would be in any way problematic? I'm presuming Kite is just referring to the kite that we moved from Princess Margaret to the library. That's pretty much, I'll follow it up, but that's all I will want to know. Is this an issue for anybody that we, instead of celebrating a kite, we draw our attention to Mr. Dadle?
Director Technical Services.
Thank you for your question. So on the outset, I don't think there's any inherent issues, but probably as a matter of course, if that's what you're foreshadowing as an alternative, we'd probably just double check with WA. There's no unforeseen issues. Randy, did you want to just chime in with anything?
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor McMullen. Look, I don't foresee any significant issues. However, we did quiz WA on the names that they have suggested, because there are existing names that are sitting on the list for quite a while now. The feedback that we actually did get from WA was that, and it's, as mentioned in the report, that the names selected do represent well in their view the significance of the site, that being Three Penny, the kite, and of course the Noongar name as well, Makuru. So we can certainly take it back to them. We have asked the question, and their preference is to keep the three names, but that doesn't stop us from taking it back to them.
Rather than, oh, sorry, you go. I'll ask after you're done.
What do you want to ask?
Oh, we're all of a sudden being too polite. Look, I'll ask mine. I think it will complement whatever you're about to say. For foreseeable issues aside, how did we get here? The report talks about the city requesting Development WA to consider names. Is there a bit of a context to the way that these names have come about? And what happens if we go back to Development WA and say, we've got this other idea for a street name? Perhaps someone can talk us through the process thus far and the process if we take a slightly different direction in terms of names. Mr. Hambley? No, one of your staff? Randia, manager?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, the process in accordance with the Land Administration Act, if there's a developer of a particular site that's developing any roads or significant landmark features, chooses to name the roads, the process is they would actually bring it to council to make the decision on the road names. And from that point on, if should council actually approve it, then that goes on to the Minister of Lands for final approval. What Development WA have done in terms of the lead up to this particular naming of the streets, have done a significant amount of engagement with Landgate as well as the elders group as well, and workshopped a number of names, and these were the ones that they have landed on. So that's the background. The city wasn't directly involved in that process per se. They approached us once the names were landed, seeking approval through this process. So I'd say, based on our current processes, council has, by all means, is able to recommend and suggest other names as per the list as well.
I understand there's another step you want to talk us through, Mr. Hambley.
Yep, just an extra point of clarification onto what Randy has said. So whatever names would be selected would need to first go back to the Geographic Names Commission, which is basically a subset of Landgate. So obviously they have strict conditions of what kind of names acceptable. That's who we have to keep checking in to see if a name's still valid, because you can't have certain types of names. They have to be. There's a lot of difficulties around the spelling of names and also having proximity. So you can't have the same name within close proximity to another. So that would be the step before it ultimately goes to the minister and gets accepted by Landgate. So just worth just clarifying that whatever name would be accepted would have to go to the GNC before the minister and Landgate.
Councillor Burns.
Look, thanks everybody. I appreciate that, and I'm not going to profess my amendment, but it will be coming, and I'm quite happy to punt Mr. Daydor against the kite, seeing the kite has a nice little corner location and we're looking after it well, and they didn't seem to want it when they tore the place down. So we'll see how the cards fall, and you know what I mean? I'm willing to bet. I'll back myself on this one, and I'm sure I can see lots of support in this room. Thank you.
Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. Just referring to the previous time we named streets in Subi East, and particularly with Chugg and Collard, they are some time ago now, and Cyril Collard has resonated very strongly with the Indigenous family. And I was just wondering, is there any timeline where we may actually be able to have an official day for that? That would be a nice thing to be able to flag at this time, if we could, please.
Yes, certainly that's been on the radar. We're trying to align that. Interestingly, the Geographic Names Committee actually rejected that name in the first instance, and we actually had to go back, and that's not unusual. It does happen at times, but eventually we got that through, which is a great outcome. And many of Cyril's relations are actually also in Victoria as well. So we have been liaising with them, and we'll try and arrange something at the appropriate time.
Councillor De Vries.
Through you. This is really for Manager Hambley. Director Hambley. Sorry, I just demoted you. When we made the decision to name the two, Collard and Chugg, several years ago, I don't believe there was a Subi East Elders reference group at that time. Is my recollection correct? Who's that going to?
Mr. Hambley was here at the time, so...
Is that direct? Is that for Manager
We'll take
Randy?
an answer from Mr. Hambley in the first instance, I think.
Sorry.
I believe for the life of the project, there has been a reference group for Dev WA, so I believe those names... because obviously there's been the Biddy Trail and all this various other elements, so I believe there was a Elders reference group at that time when that last decision was made.
So in terms of the Subi East Elders reference group, how much time did they spend working through their choices? And, you know, this is obviously a form of consultation with a really significant group. So I guess this is just sentiment, but, you know, given that there was a fair engagement from this group to make these choices, how would it be? How could we go back to them and say, look, we're considering another choice, even though it might be a good choice, that's still going to involve a few steps. That's all.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. Look, as I mentioned earlier on, the city wasn't directly involved in those engagements, but there was a fair bit of engagement that had occurred with the Subi East Elders Reference Group. That said, if elected members were to propose new names, wouldn't preclude a reverse engagement by Dev WA with the Elders Group. I think that's something that can absolutely be accommodated.
Just thinking about, I'll get to you after this, Councillor Powell. Sorry if you've had your hand up for a while. I mean, it's interesting, I think, that Development WA favours names of things other than people. It seems that their feedback was that we might look beyond the names of individuals to look at, I suppose, the history of the site. That's I mean, that's something we can speak to next week, but I suppose if that logic's accepted on this occasion, how many more streets are left in the Subi East precinct that will require names and that we'll have a say on? Randy, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Burns, through Mr. Mayor. There's no other additional street names or streets that are being created. These are the three. And actually, just to add to that, the report also talks about, in terms of future new roads in Subiaco, there aren't many opportunities for new roads to be developed because we are quite an established city. We probably only look to King Edward Hospital precinct development in the future, which is quite a way down the track, potentially.
One thing maybe just to add to that, so Ren is quite right that as far as the Subiaco East redevelopment, these are the last roads that should and would be named. The other thing, aside from the likely redevelopment of the King Edward site, there are a number of unnamed right-of-ways and roads and laneways in the city, so there's nothing that would preclude us from using these names elsewhere, and that's what was done, I think, by a council decision about 10 years ago, where a number of lanes like Xanthus and others which came off Rockaby were named, like Walmsley Lane as well. So those, so that is another opportunity that exists to the city. So there's, whilst they are existing roadways, they haven't got a formal name and could be named if council saw fit in the future. But it is a big project because there is still a lot of unnamed laneways in the city.
Good to know. Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mayor, this might be a question on notice. Do we know how often the Geographics Name Committee meets and approximately how long they take to make decisions? Because there did appear to be some sort of suggestion in the attachments that that the names had been with the Geographic Names Committee for quite some time before there was a response.
I'll start and see if Randy has anything to add. So I don't think off the top of my head I can tell you how often they meet. I suspect it's either monthly or maybe twice a month. It's quarterly. So it is. So the CEO's just looked it up. So it is quarterly. What I can also say is typically for advice, like whether a name is valid. Obviously, they've got officers who can advise on that pretty quickly, and that doesn't have to go to the committee. But it is a quarterly meeting.
Okay, any final questions? All right, we'll move on. C6, the tender for the Ada Street revitalisation. C7, the City of Subiaco Council Plan for 2025 to 2035. Councillor Johnston.
Just a quick one. I wondered how many responses we had from community about that. Thanks.
It's in the report. 61 responses were received between the 1st of May 25 to the 31st of May 25. But if you read the whole of the consultation section, you'll see that it's been a consultation period that ran for 24 months and drew from community input via a number of sources. But if we're looking at the month of May 2025, the number was 61, and as I understand it, that was as a result of a call for responses and also follow-ups close to the closing date for submissions, or responses, I should say. Further questions? Okay, I think that is C7. We'll move on to C8, the draft payments to employees in addition to contract or award policy. I will start with a question, and it's about the options. I'm pretty clear on what's being recommended. It's that there's a draft policy being proposed for adoption. The reason for that policy is being explained, and it's because it's to meet the requirements of a section of the Local Government Act. That much makes sense. When we get to the options, though, it talks about either option 1, adopting the policy, option 2, adopting the policy with amendments. I understand those two options, but option 3, not adopt the policy. How is that an option when we've identified a statutory requirement for this policy? Manager of, I'm sure your title's Manager of HR or something to that effect. Manager Human Resources, Mr. Heaperman. Sure, we'll take an answer from the Director. Director Corporate Services, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess that we have been, as we have revealed through looking at our policy suite and just reviewing to make sure that we are compliant, we've come to the understanding that we haven't been compliant for some time. So I guess that if we resolve not to adopt the policy, we'd still be in the same position that we were before. So obviously it's much better to be compliant when you identify that you have a non-compliance. There's always a bit of a debate as to whether we include that option, not to adopt the policy in agenda reports like this. But I guess part of it is considering what are the implications if you are not compliant, and sometimes that just depends on what's the tone of the state government in terms of doing anything about it if you're not compliant, depending upon their priorities.
So we've been technically compliant with a section of the Local Government Act, which is one of many sections of that Act. And the option is listed there to maintain the status quo, and it's not recommended because it would be inconsistent with the Act.
I think generally there would be the expectation that when we identify that we're not compliant with something, that we address it, and it probably wouldn't be a great look to continue to be non-compliant.
Okay, so not a good option then in staff's view. Any other questions on the agenda item? Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. Just an obvious question. Is there any retrospectivity with this?
Through you, Mayor, no.
Okay, any other questions on the agenda item C8? C9, the review of the register of delegations and authorisations from the Council to the CEO for the coming financial year. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. Look, forgive me if I'm missing something here, but couple of points. Is this it firstly for the year? I only raised this because, is this a brief one? Because I know when I moved the elected members motion, my elected members motion, which was pulling some authority, delegated authority with regard to certain planning heritage matters, and it was decided that we would address it later when we're looking at delegated authority. Is that what we're doing right now? Because it was never brought up again. That's the first part of it.
Director Corporate Services.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. So, yeah, there is that opportunity now. So I don't know if the Manager of Planning Services has anything to... yep.
Yeah, I don't think we need to hear from the Manager of Planning Services. If there was an appetite to make any changes to what's listed here, the opportunity would be in the time between now and the OCM.
I'm having a little trouble with this because I put it up, and the motion was not carried, but there was nobody, from my recollection, spoke for really or against it. They just thought it needed to be looked at later on, and it was identified that there was between putting the elected members motion up and when we do this, that it was suggested there would be a forum, a discussion or whatever else. And then this is sitting before me and no such thing's taking place. And I'm being told I've now got a week to arguably do exactly what I had to do before, which is put up an argument to alter thing. And there are literally thousands, or not thousands, hundreds of these delegated authorities that we should be looking at. And instead, all I see is additions. I don't see...
What this is, as I think you'll appreciate, is an annual review. So given the work that's been gone into annual reviews in the last few years that I can remember, there have been some years where there's been more substantial changes than others. So look, that might explain why there's only 6 listed updates to the delegations. Look, as for the thing you mentioned at a previous ordinary council meeting, I now remember the debate. I remember it quite well, in fact. And we haven't discussed the matter in a workshop or a forum. And I think, as I recall it, the appetite at the time, certainly I can only speak for myself, and what led me to vote the way that I did was that we should have a discussion between council meetings about the idea of delegations on that topic, which we haven't had. So I think the answer for the question for staff is there time, I suppose, to workshop this subject, which I think there was general appetite to discuss, rather than lobbing it up as a future EMM, which would put us in the same position as we were before, like I think you've said. CEO.
So I think in terms of this, there's a few options for council. Firstly, because we can certainly do a workshop to work, or we need to do a schedule it. We do that all the time. We haven't scheduled that yet. Apologies for that, but that's something that we can schedule. So council's options would be either to defer this matter until that has occurred. Alternatively, they could proceed with this review, but still, once that workshop has occurred, then to put a report to council in relation to those items that council wish to either adjust or add as a new delegation or take away as a delegation. So that would be the options for council: either deal with it next week in the current form, or make amendments to it, or alternatively not deal with it and have a workshop in relation to specific items and bring it back.
I'm going to gratuitously put forward a view here, but I would think, given the talk about technical non-compliances in relation to the previous agenda item, we should probably complete the annual review in accordance with the time frame and add a rider that reflects the intention to consider the specific delegation that Councillor Burns is talking about after we've completed the annual review of delegations. Otherwise, we will not have completed our review of annual delegations within the financial year.
So it could be an additional, in terms of the council resolution. Could be
Sure, Councillor Burns.
Maybe Mullen, look, at the moment, I can accept the logic of that, but I will say that I am going to ponder and deliberate whether or not I'm more inclined to see it, see this matter deferred and them done collectively. But I am cognizant of the logic and what you're saying. I'm a little miffed, to be frank. So let's see if I can get over that tonight. So many times. Can I just ask one more then? Okay. Look, I'm having just trouble interpreting, but item 6, which is an addition relating to the short stay issues, can somebody just summarise what we're doing here, seeing this is already before us? We've just spent a whole bunch of time talking about short stay, and now we seem to be delegating some authority. I'd just like a better summation that I'm not getting it, I suppose. So some clarity would be great.
I think we probably need a planning officer to comment on the substance of the delegation. So, Mr. Denham, if you'd be able to answer that, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So this relates to the Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act. So it's the legislation that the state government enforces. So a Section 29 certificate is basically, if we receive a number of complaints or if there's non-compliance with an operator, we can, a designated officer, the CEO or those that are listed as designated officers, can represent the local government to the Commissioner of Demers.
Okay, any other questions on the delegations item? Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to C10, the annual budget for the coming financial year. Questions? Councillor De Vries.
Through you, Mayor, I'll try to remember to turn this off when I finish talking. So just a really quick one. I think this is through you to Director Wollaston. Subiaco is in an enviable position. What factors have contributed to the city's ability to hold the minimum rate at 1.9% for 7 years despite inflationary pressures and costs increases? What is that? Can you tell us, please?
Gosh, that's 4 workshops worth of material. But Director Corporate Services, what have we considered? What have you considered in making this recommendation to us?
Sure, through you, Mayor. Let me try to summarise that. So, having written and reviewed this text quite a few times through the budget, but it is actually what we do. We apply principles of prudent financial management. Some of those include, keeping a tight rein on costs. So, for example, where we're able to, our managers keep costs flat or seek cost reductions. This partially helps to offset cost increases. We also have increasing dwelling numbers in the city, and this contributes to our rate base, which means that we get some tailwinds on rates in addition to our rates increase. And also, we've always, for a long time now, adopted a strategy of pursuing diversified revenue streams. So that includes things like our investment, so our commercial property portfolio, which we're diversifying in accordance with our business plan into other asset classes, as well as things like when we do have revenue streams. So, for example, Lords, looking at ways to grow the membership base and offer services that really make use of the capacity of that facility when it would traditionally be quieter. So the team's been doing a great job there. Other things like taking on the management of additional car parks. So there's quite a few things that we do to supplement our revenue base and keep costs in check so that we can offer these kind of rate increases to the community.
Councillor De Vries, further questions?
Just a question on the reserve transfer from the 1 million for, I won't go into the detail, but that big figure, that reserve transfer to serve as an internal loan towards the digital transformation strategy. What strategies do we have in place to make sure that remains sustainable and doesn't undermine the long-term asset renewal needs? Thank you.
Sure. So through you, Mayor. So I believe it was a couple of years ago now that we started the digital transformation program, and it's a 3-year program. And so we, throughout the life cycle of that project, have undertaken to fund it through an internal loan from our capital investment reserve. We have just through our surpluses alone. So in the first year, I think the amount was $2-point-something million, which we were able to pay back. We've already paid back, I think, about $1 million of the second year of the program. So we have kind of budgeted that loan, I think, over a 10-year period to pay ourselves back, something of that nature. But we are making rapid headway so that we will essentially be back to square, probably in the next couple of years. Yep.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. That sounds like it's less than 10 years. Is that correct, to pay it back? You said we budgeted for 10, but now it sounds like 5.
So through you, Mayor. So yeah, we budgeted for 10 for just in order to be prudent and just to put something down on paper, which we knew that we'd be able to commit to repay. But when we do have excess funds available, it's up to council. Really, it's council's decision as part of mid-year review how we deploy any excess funds from the prior financial year and from the financial year that we happen to be in at the time. Council has so far resolved to pay back early. So it's really up to council. But assuming you're all good with that philosophy of paying it back early, commensurate to what other priorities that we have at the time, then we're probably ahead of that 10-year schedule. Yeah.
I might just
CEO,
add something through the chair, if that's okay. So some of the examples of similar sort of approach, and usually it happens at the end of the financial year when we see where the position is, and then that's as Emma has identified in terms of the half-year review. So things that we've used in a similar sort of way would be the drainage that we upgraded to 1 in 100 years. There's a range of these particular items that we've used to pick up the surplus, and so therefore generally our estimates on revenue have sort of been conservative, and our estimates on expenditure have been conservative. So we've had some decent surpluses at the end of each financial year, which give us the opportunity to pay these back sooner. So we've just sort of anticipated a longer plan, but as Emma quite rightly points out, we'll probably be able to deliver that much sooner.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Given the recent report from the Auditor General on the blowout in the state government IT projects, can we have some comment on the progress of our digital transformation project and how it's running on budget?
I know the CEO wants to answer this one. CEO.
Yeah, so absolutely, it's I got it in front of me and have gone through it. This report you're referring to. So in terms of ours, we there was 3 different council resolutions to get where we did, and we identified a really detailed plan in terms of the project, which was about 3 years, but we did a 10-year time frame. And if I recall, that was in May 2023, in terms of prior to council signing the contract with Technology One. Most of the costs are actually beyond the actual contract with Technology One, and certainly for each phase, and this phase will be under budget, on time, on quality. There are some of the elements that we're a little bit ambitious on that will form part of business as usual improvement, which was the creation of the directorate to deal with that as well. But certainly, yeah, under budget, on time, on quality.
Councillors, questions on the budget? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mayor. Look, point E in the officer recommendation, 11% interest calculated daily on unpaid rates. Is there any latitude, or is that set by somebody else that is the charge? I mean, because otherwise it seems to be quite a high penalty rate.
Can I jump in first?
CEO.
Okay, so it's been set for many years. It has been adjusted through COVID times by the government, but it's gone back to the 11%. The reason, at one point in time, the minister Castrilli in the day, attempted to change it to 6, and I rang their office and said, look, we've got a problem because under legislation you require us to collect the Fire and Emergency Services levy on behalf of the state government, and that interest component was at 11%. So if you have 2 different interest charged when you go before a magistrate because somebody's paid a part rates, did they pay the rates or did they pay the ESL levy? And so generally what's happened is over time that stayed at 11%, and the reason being is because it's also in the emergency services levy legislation around 11%. So it's best that they're both, because if there is a dispute on rates and people have made part payments, it would be impossible for us to work out whether they pay the ESL or whether they pay the rates. So that's why it's best for council not to adjust that. Otherwise it could cause us problems.
Councillor Johnston. Councillor Powell.
Yeah, look, this is probably a little bit of a parish pump one, but the upgrade to the Shenton Park Community Centre is in the budget, and there'll be further community consultation to make some small changes. But what is the budget allocation for this upgrade, and when can we expect the upgrade to occur?
Director Corporate Services.
Yep, so through you, Mayor. So you'll see that there is a budget allocation recommended to Council of $800,000 in the year ahead. That won't get us the whole way through the project. We don't have a budget for the full project at the moment because it's still subject to community consultation in terms of what they would like to see, and we will bring that back through the elected members in terms of what that might look like from a budget perspective once we have further information in terms of what comes back from community consultation. So there's no budget for the full project at the moment. We anticipate getting through, I believe, that consultation and finalising a design that we can commence work on in the financial year ahead.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Just referring in the attachments to the Statement of Comprehensive Income budgeted amount for the forthcoming financial year 25-26, the net result that's budgeted is that a deficit of $3 million?
Director Corporate Services.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor. So we're budgeting a balanced budget. We're budgeting for a balanced budget, so net zero. But if you look at that operating line, that's where you'll see that negative $3.6 million. It's balanced out by items on other lines.
Thank you. You might have to take me through that later then. Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget? Councillor Johnston.
Just one other thanks. It mentions there's a 50% discount for pensioners on the waste charges. How do people find out about that? And do you think that there's a lot of take up within the community of pensioners taking that up? Do they know about it? Thanks.
Sure. So I'll start and then probably hand over to our manager, finance, Lauren. So, it's the sort of thing that we would advertise on our website and on our rates flyers that we hand out with our rates notices each year, so that people have the information when they open the envelope. But I'll hand over to you, Lauren, in case there's anything else to add.
Yes, thank you, Emma, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Any ratepayer that is registered as a pensioner with us on 1 July will automatically be applied that the discount on their rubbish charges. So they don't need to apply for the rubbish discount itself. When they become a pensioner and they're registered as of 1 July, they automatically get it.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnston, you asked a question a moment ago which the CEO thinks he can answer on the spot. So we'll see if we can get an answer from the CEO and perhaps continue the discussion outside of the session if it doesn't answer the question.
Thanks. I just thought I'd clarify, when you're looking at this, the operating statement, that has different elements to it to the statement of financial activity. So it's the peculiarities of this statement, which once upon a time was also called a rate-setting statement. So if you look at the statement of financial activity and you go right to the bottom, you'll see that the surplus or deficit generated from rates is zero, but the operating statement contains a range of different elements that is not just within the statement of financial activity. So if that statement of financial activity has both operating activities, it also has the capital components in terms of transfers to reserves and payments for capital, etc. So that deals with all of the funds in and out, so that the budget surplus is zero, if that makes sense. So that's generally the document by which council determine whether there's a deficit or not.
Thank you.
Okay, final questions on the budget for next year, for next financial year. Okay, I think we're on to the last public agenda item, the financial statements and reports for the month ending 31 May 2025. C11, any questions on the item? Okay, thank you, councillors, for your questions and staff for your advice. There will be a confidential section to next week's meeting, but for the purposes of this evening, I can declare the agenda briefing closed at 7:07 p.m. Thanks, everyone.